We have tea to talk about, and this is with an artist that is extremely popular that you guys have probably heard of called Ross Draws. So this is a tweet made by Twitter user underscore Beazle, who goes by Beazle, writing, Ross Draws is a massive liar and is heavily using Gen AI in most of his new works. He is currently misleading business partners that have a zero AI policy to publish his book. So here are screen grabs of his artwork, allegedly his artwork, also allegedly potentially AI. It's a little bit odd, but the thing is, when it comes to AI, it's always a little tricky because it's like the chicken versus the egg, right? Like, which came first? Ross Draws is an extremely popular artist whose art style is heavily coveted by other people. So Ross Draws is an artist that AI has trained their art on to produce art, but he himself is a very reputable and known artist. So that's the thing where it gets finicky of like, is this AI? Is this actually his artwork? AI is trained off human artists, so it does get a little iffy sometimes when it comes to identifying AI pieces just for that. But there are also, again, we can take looks, we can acknowledge irregularities within the artwork that, hey, somebody like Ross Draws, who has such extensive art experience as him, likely should not be making these mistakes, right? Of course, all artists, no matter how experienced you are, will make human errors. But again, we need to keep that into account, a little bit of like red flags going on in these pieces right here, right? The jacket cutting into the pants coming out, the shorts not quite lining up right, but maybe it's like a cropping issue at the end of the day. Just looks a little bit off, right? So Beazle links a Google Doc, writing source 1. This is a big, juicy Google Doc, 20 pages, and it reads, my issues with Ross Draws. Disclaimer, the opinions and views I speak of in this Google Doc are based on my own experiences with the party involved. My name is Fen. I'm somebody who used to be very active in his community and that he eventually had me on to help with conventions, teach him Clip Studio Paint, and to ask for my feedback on prints, his projects, and was popular in anime circles. I've only done 2 conventions for Ross. The first one was Lightbox 2023, where some of these issues were present, but they weren't as egregious. A lot of these issues became obvious at Anime Expo 2024. Ross cares very much about appearances to the point it consumes him and has a very inflated self-image about himself. In my opinion, Ross doesn't see people, but as tools, assets, and props for his vision. He doesn't really have any regard for what other people go through and will make a bunch of false promises as long as he gets what he wants. So here are some DMs between Ross and Fen, and these DMs took place October 24th, 2023. This is a year and a half ago. So Ross writes, yo, so redacted message me. I thought you were volunteering at Lightbox, which is the main reason why I'm bringing you. Were you expecting compensation for this one? Sorry for miscommunication. I had some volunteers come up. And Fen writes, LOL, no, I was just curious. I'm happy to volunteer. I just had the thought and wanted to be sure. You're already doing so much. And Ross says, okay, gotcha. And Fen writes, can't wait to be a nuisance this weekend. By the way, this to me is weird. Here's the thing. For the most part, with conventions, the way it typically works, right, is artists will get booths at conventions, will typically, a lot of times, be behind the booth vending at the convention. But it's a lot of work for one person to run a booth at a convention, especially for somebody of the size of Ross Draws, because Ross Draws' booth at Anime Expo is massive. I went to it in 2023. His booth was huge. He had a lot of products to sell, books, whatever, area to take pictures, whatever. It's hefty. It is not something one person can do. Even like smaller booths, it's really hard for one person to run. So most of the time, artists will bring on other people, helpers to help. Sometimes it's volunteers. Most artists do pay, because it is labor at the end of the day. You're asking somebody else to man the booth with you 8 hours a day, not including setup and breakdown, for like 3 days. Anime Expo ran over 4 days in 2024. And you want these people to do this unpaid? Again, it's one thing if it's like a family friend, whatever, and then you're like, hey, you remember last week when your car broke down and I helped jump your car and then I also mowed your lawn the week prior? Can you just like scratch my back for this one and cover my booth for me, like help each other out? That's one thing, but like when you're an artist as big as Ross Draws, I am sure that Ross Draws has some deep pockets, probably because of the size of his YouTube channel, etc., his other ventures, selling books and art, stuff like that. And you don't want to pay people like the minimum wage it is to make them work for that weekend. Like, to me, that's just weird. I've watched a lot of other artist vlogs of artists vending at conventions. An artist I asked to be a volunteer said, well, it's not paid implied. They'll buy us a 3-day badge for the convention, so we don't pay for badges. Yeah, like it is 50-50, you know? Some artists do look for volunteers, some artists do compensate. In my opinion, if you do have the financial means for it, which I don't know Ross Draws' finances, but I would be hard pressed to imagine he can't afford the labor, I would really hope you pay the people working, especially because his booth is fucking large, okay? It's not just like you're just kind of chilling around eating a sandwich behind the booth. Like, Ross Draws' booth is big. I was there in 2023 at Anime Expo. It is large. His booth is a lot of work. You know, Jay, I sold at vintage and artist markets. Even though I never made much, I still paid the people who helped me and got them food and covered transportation. Yeah, see, that is like, in my opinion, just ethical labor, right? Like, I've hosted events before on my stream. I pay my mods for the labor I use them for on those events. It's digital. You're all sitting behind a screen, but still, you're putting in time to help me run this thing. I will still pay you just because I want to. I just think it's ethical to pay you for your labor. I know that if I put out a tweet being like, any volunteers for this, I'm going to get so many people who are willing to do it for free. But I feel unethical exploiting people's willingness to do free labor for me. That's just me though. I'm curious about your thoughts at the end of the day. But I just think it's weird. So Fen continues, Ross doesn't like to pay people. He will do his best to get volunteers, but if you bring up payment, he's very quick to take it away. And we're somebody who isn't afforded many opportunities like this, and you want to do anything you can to preserve it. And I did agree to volunteer for this. I had only brought it up because I found out other people had been paid, were getting paid, or had their flights reimbursed. After my experience with Ross, I think he knows that people want to get close to him and will take advantage of that. I'm in the same boat. I know there's a lot of people who want to do stuff for me for free. I say no to all of it because I don't want to exploit you. You know what I mean? Like, if you made me fan art, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for any fan art I received. But I've had people in my DMs being like, I'm willing to do free stuff for you. Free labor, this, that, the third. I say no to all of it. I am very appreciative of it. But I understand the very, very finicky scenario it puts both of us into, where I am accepting your free labor that you are offering because you like me parasocially as a content creator. Do you see how that gets really messy really fast? Right? So Fen continues, here Ross specifically asked me to work for him at Anime Expo 2024. And like I mentioned before, when it comes to payment, he'll threaten to take the opportunity away. Yes, he housed me, but he also housed my coworker for this convention and he paid him. Wow. So he paid one person but not Fen? So in the DMs, this is now March 1st, 2024. So Ross writes, oh, whoa, hell yeah, you're coming back to Lightbox? Come to AX, help us. And Fen says, yeah, I love being in LA and it's nice to be surrounded by artists with the same amount of drive. I think Maive and Zach wants to come too. In response, Fen says, bro wants my free labor. Will you house me again? And Ross says, LMAO, sure. And Fen says, okay, maybe I'll let you know. Will you buy my plane ticket, side eye? And Ross says, well then I can just pay somebody here. Okay, we can talk when it comes closer, lol. Ew, that is so weird by Ross. You want somebody to do labor, but you won't even pay for their transportation to get there, to get to you? But yeah, this is weird by Ross. This is very scummy. I don't know how much money Ross makes, but you for sure can afford to pay like a couple people to be your help for the weekend. I have seen artists much smaller than Ross do vlogs about Anime Expo. A lot of artists make, 10,000, 20,000 over the weekend. Come on, Ross. And then they're out here paying their help. You know? Fen continues to add further support to what I'm saying. Ross has also asked me to stay for San Diego Comic-Con after AX, both in the same month. At this point, I'm not being paid and I work 2 jobs and I do overtime just to make sure I can afford this trip and to make sure my bills are covered for the time I'm gone. Here, he wanted me to stay the whole month, unpaid, but masked it as a month's vacation. My bills don't take a vacation with me. And before people comment on my rent and utilities, I have a roommate and this is just the bare minimum of what I pay in expenses. I had to forego other bills to make the number as small as possible, but instead he rescinded the offer. At the end of AX, my coworker is trying to tell me that $830 was way too expensive and like it was a no-brainer for Ross to decline. Meanwhile, he self-admitted that when he lived on his own, he paid $1,600 and Ross pays way more than me for his home. So to be told by 2 other people that $830 was too expensive and an egregious number to ask was just gross. So here are the DMs. This happened June 25th, 2024. Ross says, okay, cuz I might keep you for San Diego Comic-Con. And Fen says, ... when San Diego Comic-Con? JK, I looked it up, bro. Ross says, LOL, what? And Fen says, unless you're paying my July rent, I can't stay the whole month. And Ross says, ha ha ha, you get a whole July vacation. Fen says, it's okay, I've already done the math. My rent and utilities is $830. Venmo, Zelle, PayPal. Oh, trust me, I would love to just spend time in Cali all of July, but I'm broke. And Ross says, LMFAO. Sorry, this is gonna come out kind of rude. Is Ross like extremely privileged? Did he just not grow up with like any suffering. Or maybe he's just so out of touch with reality at this point because he's a large creator now, woo, that he doesn't realize, hey, you know, when you ask people to like sit in your house for a month, you think it's a vacation. People still have bills to pay. So how do you think they're gonna make the $830 to pay their rent? Like, just genuinely wondering. Penny, it's giving, quote, so no one else got a Tesla for their 16th birthday, end quote. Yeah, like this is reading really out of touch to me. Also, $830 is really cheap for rent, by the way. Maybe I'm out of touch, right? Because I've only lived in California, but I'm from California. I live in California. I've lived here my whole life. I lived in China. $830 for rent and utilities is quite cheap. My portion of the rent is $1,600, not including utilities. I live in LA with 2 roommates. 2 roommates, by the way. It's just LA. It's LA stuff. But yeah, $830 rent and utilities, 1, is very cheap. But 2, I think if your employer, right, because in this case, Ross Draws is employing Fen to work as hired help or unpaid help, right? You should pay if you want them to stay there for a month. Oh, my kitty, my cat. Look at him. So Fen continues, ultimately though, did I get paid for Anime Expo 2024? Yes, but how I got paid was weird. It's the end of the first day and Ross is saying that we need a third person. My coworker said he has a friend that he can ask, so he's texting his friend. My coworker turns to Ross and asks how much is the pay again. Ross says minimum wage and the friend agrees. I am sitting there dumbfounded. I have sold at conventions before. This is not my first convention for Ross. I flew out here for Ross and the friend we bought on has never done a convention before, is relatively local, and Ross decided to pay him without question. So I brought it up to Ross and he told me, quote, I can take you far, end quote. He essentially offered me exposure in lieu of payment. Sorry, I had to pause because my jaw was on the fucking floor. He thought I didn't believe him, but it wasn't out of whether or not he can. Why are you picking and choosing who to pay like this when I have actual experience and I flew out here? By the way, offering exposure for payment is fucking disgusting. Point blank simple. Like, who do you think you are? Even if you are almost 2 million subscriber YouTuber, like, oh, I can give you exposure. That to me, all I hear is, hey, I'm cheap as fuck and I don't want to pay you for your labor. That's weird. Straight up. Look, exposure doesn't pay Fen's rent. It doesn't pay Fen's utilities. You're wild for saying that. Fen continues, which he would have never taken me anywhere in my career. He uses his connections as more of a dangling carrot. He wouldn't go out of his way to actually introduce you to anyone in the industry and would actually get upset if he tried to talk to his friends in the industry. The only people he has introduced me to are people he knows but aren't artists, like game devs or anything of the sort. He even told me to tell him if there's anyone he can introduce me to, but he'll talk to them for 30 minutes and won't introduce me. This happened multiple times. If you're gonna use your network as a way to avoid paying me, you can't just gatekeep that very same network from me. By the way, I just hate people like that in general, people who gatekeep. But there's a fair amount of content creators who are weird like that too. They feel some type of way if they think you're gonna become friends with their friends who are also content creators that have followers, and like you're trying to be friends with them just because you think they're cool and you want to be friends with them, but they think you're like taking away their opportunity or like you're stealing their connection. You know what I mean? Sometimes it just gets really messy and I don't like that. Like one time I was at an event at TwitchCon and this streamer came up to me and she's like, hey Kat, da da da, I love your stuff. Blah, blah, blah. By the way, how do I get into your talent agency? I love your talent agency. I would love to like join them. Da, 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 da. And I said, oh my God, one of my talent managers is right here. Let me go grab him and introduce you guys to each other so you guys can start talking. Yeah, I literally found the guy, Alex. I was like, hey, Alex, da, 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 come here. Hey, there's these streamers, they're a pair, and they're really cool, and they really would, you know, love to, like, join Nani. So, you know, Alex, here's them, streamers, here's Alex. And then I was like, I'm gonna leave you guys to talk. I'm just gonna go over here and get some food. It doesn't hurt me to give other people more opportunities. You know what I mean? Like, me introducing them to my talent agency does not change the fact that my talent agency will still work with me. I literally lose nothing. If anything, I gain, because if they do join the talent agency, then the talent agency has more people, more connections, and then that'll also bring me more opportunities. Like, so it's just weird. I hate people who gatekeep like that. It's just so annoying. Fen continues, now the actual convention. It was weird in my opinion. Ross is very aware of appearances and how everything looked, which it's a convention and that makes sense to a degree. But we didn't have working lights on the first day and Ross was just pacing around the booth, frustrated and upset. Did the booth look a little dull? Maybe, but it was such a minor thing at the end of the day and it ruined his mood for a whole day. He also didn't buy electricity apparently. He eventually did, but initially wanted to ask our neighbors for electricity. I refused to ask because they paid for theirs and our issues aren't their responsibility. Okay, that is again weird. Like, I think it's odd that the conventions will ask you to pay for electricity. Is that common? I don't know. Don't try to mooch off other people, just pay. Ross doesn't like to work at conventions. A lot of people come for Ross, but many times I had to tell people that Ross isn't here and won't be here for a couple hours. And sometimes he showed up at the time I said, or other times it'd be an hour or two later. When he gets there and anyone asks him a question about the booth, he will literally slide out of the way and point to me or my coworker. He probably couldn't run his booth on his own at all. He has even said he wanted us employees to keep things running so he can, quote, do his own thing, end quote, which tends to be talk to his fans that tell him how much they love him or talk to his friends. He's in the exhibitor hall. He has always been in the exhibitor hall, but this year Ross was upset about the sales. The reason he told himself is that his people are in the artist alley, which I do agree to an extent. Ross is rarely in the artist alley. The points that I brought up to him about his sales are as follows. 1. His dedicated fans have all the prints they want from him, especially because Ross was on a hiatus and didn't come back with a good library of new prints, only a couple at best. It's not a good sign when multiple customers have said, quote, I need to check my inventory before buying, end quote. That's like a suffering from success thing though. A lot of people go to the exhibitor hall to buy more physical and corporate merch. They go buy their art in the artist alley. People tend to go to the exhibitor hall first, then the artist alley, especially because people accidentally go to the exhibitor hall first thinking it's the artist alley, since it's right there in your face and the artist alley is in the basement. Yep. Lovely old Kentia hall with zero freaking oxygen in there. 3. New people aren't as enticed to buy prints from an artist they don't know when you consider the price. Ross's prints run $30 or 3 prints for $60. Buy 2, get 1 free. With the state of the economy the way it is, people are more conscious with their spending, even at conventions. When I told him this, Ross got defensive, saying that his art is worth it. Pricing it any less would cheapen his art. In my opinion, this falls into the charge what you're worth mentality, which tends to lead to very toxic pricing, which leads to anti-consumer pricing. Look, in my opinion, artists are completely entitled to charge whatever prices they want. You also have to be realistic, and if you charge really high prices and the economy sucks, you're gonna get less sales. It is what it is. You are completely valid to charge $30 for a print. Just don't be mad that because the economy is bad, people can't afford $30 prints. This next part made me realize how into himself Ross is. There was this fan that wanted to buy Ross and the employees dinner. We settled on K-barbecue and Ross just didn't want to do it. He wanted to have more separation and didn't want it to become an obligation. Ross didn't want to plan it, so he almost gave this guy my number without my consent. I had to talk him out of it. We did have dinner with this guy and his friends, and they're great people. The reason why we ended up going was because Ross was having a bad couple of days and said, quote, it'll be nice to talk to somebody who loves him. It'll generate some good karma for myself. Wait, not that I should do it for the good karma, but it will be a good thing to do, end quote. This is like really to me like he thinks he's a K-pop idol, you know? Like, I don't know. It's like kind of wild. This is the thing, guys. Look, don't ever meet your idols, bro. You're gonna be disappointed. I used to be a big fan of Ross Draws. I met him at Anime Expo in 2023, and then I bought an art book from him because I love art books, so I just collect them. A little sad hearing this. Don't meet your idols, guys. But Fen continues, that was my last experience with Ross at Anime Expo, but the issues don't end there. He talks about his burnout in his latest YouTube videos and seeking mental health treatment, but he presents this in a disingenuous way. In his YouTube video, he said he checked himself into a mental health retreat for a week. The issue here is the word retreat. There is no such thing as a mental health retreat in a clinical therapeutic sense, but definitely in a wellness and spiritual sense, especially because he described it as a group setting, which isn't normal when processing trauma. If you ever went down the spiritual rabbit hole, you'll know how problematic these circles are and don't encourage actual healing. Now, if he went into this as something supplemental, that would be one thing, but he uses language in his video to make it sound like a legitimate clinical setting when it's not. He also has told me that he got a spiritual download from his spirit guides that told, quote, the universe is here to support him. Everything in the universe is for him to use, end quote. My experiences with him have supported this through and through. By the way, I just have to say, like, you know when the spirit guides tell you things, like, the whole point is to take it with a grain of salt. If the spirit guides tell you the universe is here to support you and everything in the universe is here for you to use, it doesn't literally mean to use all the people around you like disposable resources. So in the screenshot, there's some DMs between Fen and Ross. This is June 13, 2023, where Fen says, how's your long hiatus? Did you find yourself yet? And Ross says, I got back from a mental health, emotional health wellness retreat and I feel a million times better. This next part plays back into Ross talking about how bad his sales were at Anime Expo. If you remember, before Ross dropped off the face of the internet, he had a sale to clear out his merch because he wanted to come back with new merch. But then he went on his hiatus and then came back to cons with the same merch. And he refused to get prints of some of the stuff people were asking for. Prints like Sword Art Online, Ranny from Elden Ring, Wraith from Apex, he didn't want to stock up on those. It feels like he's treating conventions as a way to clear out the remaining inventory when that's what the sales were for back in 2023. We even had this Mulan print up from 2016 at Anime Expo 2024, which is a beautiful piece, but the style is so different and nothing about it screams Mulan. Frilly. And yeah, here you can see in the DMs, this is also the same day, June 13, 2023, Ross writes, let me tell you my plan. I'm gonna do Anime Expo Comic Con, then I'm gonna have a big event sale. That's basically like a summer epic sale to clear out my merch because I'll relaunch for the holidays, so it will be closed after that sale. Like a goodbye for now, end of summer until whatever sale. LMAO, my whole store will be on sale. And then Fen says, ooh, okay, that's smart. Especially after these 6 months of silence, the hype will be there. Ooh, a sale. I might be finally able to afford a print. And this is the Mulan print in question. Fen continues, this last bit is a more serious accusation. He has only provided me very minimal evidence in the grand scheme of things, so please use your best judgment. Ross is working on a new project right now, which is another art book, and I can't in good conscience encourage anyone to buy it. Something about the book just doesn't feel authentic. This book is supposed to be a representation of Ross and his journey through life, his burnout to the present and future. In my opinion, nothing about the art, the characters, or the designs are authentic to Ross. Below is a character sheet that Ross has shown me that he's worked on for the main character of his new book and is currently the profile picture of his Instagram. If you look at all the different versions, you can see there's a lot of inconsistencies with the style, how he's drawn and rendered, the weird oversized sleeve, the shorts, his hair, and the most important piece of all, the weird realistic render that's cropped out to the left. That's because all of this is AI, including his Instagram profile picture. He has shown me and admitted to me in person that he has used AI, but unfortunately these are all the pictures I have to show at the moment. I'm well aware that some of these images aren't released yet to the public, but the ones that will be released will have been painted over to hide any traces of AI. And here we can see these are the photos that have not been released yet of this character. Here we can see the side-by-side turnaround of the character. Here's some more close-ups. This kind of feels AI to me. This is his profile photo. I know any proof I have around this is sparse because he's very intentional with when and how he shares images. Below, I've attached an image of his newest Alphonse print. I hope I read that right. But I've also attached a work in progress that he sent of the piece. And at first, nothing looks out of the ordinary, but then you look at the legs. There's a lot of weird mechanical artifacts that don't make sense. And since Alphonse is a suit of armor, there should be some symmetry between the two legs, which you may want to say that it's artistic interpretation, but that doesn't explain the very realistic metallic render that ended up painting over to hide his tracks. So here is the piece. And then here is the work in progress. I will say in Ross Draws' videos, he's made videos in the past about his art process. And in his art process, he uses a process called photo bashing, where he will take pictures and then bash the pictures together and then paint over the photo bash. Again, I do not know him personally, right? I've met him in person twice, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if he has painted over AI because it fits in his art process of photo bashing, where you take a bunch of pictures, bash it together, and then paint over it. That is his art process. So what's to say maybe AI wasn't used as part of the photos that were smashed together to then be painted over. You know what I mean? As long as you have the licenses to use the photos, that is a very valid way to make art. 3D models, super valid too. Just make sure, again, you have the license for the 3D model you're tracing over, right? Like plenty of free ones, etc. Don't be stealing models and then painting over those. Don't be stealing pictures and painting over the pictures, right? Use it with consent. It is a very valid process. Now, taking AI art pieces and then painting over that, not valid anymore. So Fen continues, these are supposed to be the landscapes in his book, some of which feels very Ross Draws, but a couple feel nothing like what Ross does at all. I wish I had some of the larger files, but Ross tends to show these low-res screenshots, making it very difficult. But if you see some of the highlighted images and compare them to his other landscapes, you should be able to put the pieces together. So for personally, this feels like a bitter friend getting revenge. I think this would stand better if they just talked about the AI use. I do think though, talking about his like unethical behavior in terms of the unwillingness to pay, I think that's also fair to add in though. I do totally get it though. It can read a little bitter, right? Because this person has had a poor experience with Ross and their bitterness is what inspired them to make this post. Not paying the volunteers is also like pretty unethical behavior that I do think is like fair to mention as well. But yeah, so here are some of the artworks, some of the comparisons that, yeah, I mean, these ones definitely don't necessarily feel as much in his style as like other pieces. Maybe he's experimenting, maybe it's AI, right? It's hard to tell when the pictures are this small. Ross had also asked me on people's take with AI multiple times as a way to see if people are becoming more open to using AI. So that way he'll be able to eventually come out with it. I have shared with him videos from creators talking about AI hate and he always leaves me on red. So this is Ross, June 13, 2023, writing, also, do people still really hate AI? And then 9 months later, now we're in March 7th, 2024, Ross writes, okay, I will think. What's the vibe of digital art nowadays? Short form content and AI hate? So Fen continues, I also suspect he's taking a lot of the inspiration for his art from the people around him to the point of stealing. His newest character that he's posting everywhere, Hollow, was a character that was made back on his Twitch when he was streaming regularly. But there are aspects to this character that are present now that weren't back then. Now, I know the first thought is that things change over time, but in Ross's newest video that he introduced this character, he tried to have a reason for every aspect of his design. But the eyes. He even gave a half-hearted reason about the impression expression or the scar on his face, saying that when you rest your hand on the face, it leaves a scar, and that the glitch pattern is due to him having carpal tunnel. He has never mentioned to anyone prior to this, or other people close to him, that he has carpal tunnel, so I'm not inclined to believe this excuse. That, and when I was at his place for Anime Expo, he showed me that he was playing around with this retro grainy and bitmap texture because it looks cool. There was no real meaning behind this. Also, because he asked for my opinion on the logo for his new book and which one looked better. It was all mostly the same, but the only difference was a random symbol he drew. I asked him what it meant to him, and he responded, quote, "What do you mean? It just looks cool," end quote. But if this is supposed to be a book about you and your journey, it should have some meaning, not because it looks cool. Which brings me back to the eyes. There's a mutual friend that all the effects, patterns, and themes behind Hollow that I believe Ross has taken from. Not just from inspiration, but ripped from entirely. Because in the video, he has given no meaning to these eyes, but they are everywhere. This is not my story to tell, but this is something that needs to be brought to light. So here we have the character Hollow. Then continues, this character here, the main character of the book, was also called Kid. Ross ended up changing the name of the character because he was allegedly caught copying the name and the motifs of the character from our mutual friend, who had a younger version of himself with a demon character that had eyes and mouth motifs everywhere. Our mutual friend has also themes of retro games and text for over a decade now. These motifs weren't originally present in the design, and now Russ is doubling down on including them everywhere he can without giving them a real meaning. You can say he took inspiration from my friend, but the original idea was supposed to be about music and all the different aspects of yourself coming together like a symphony. It feels weird to switch from that to the eyes, demon, retro tech bitmap textures. He also included a little sprite companion for this kid, just like our mutual friend, who has a sprite-like character with an eye. Ross's sprite-like character has two eyes. There is such a fine line of taking inspiration from your friends and taking everything they do, rebranding it, and calling it your original work. I'll need to see this mutual friend. I will say this type of vibe isn't typically what Ross draws, but again, maybe he's being experimental. And then here is the Kid character. Then continues, especially because if you tell Ross your own experience or an idea that you have, he'll hear it, dismiss it entirely, but then bring it up again like it was his own idea. For example, we both have an Atlantis project, but he did his nearly a decade ago and rarely touched it. I was talking about it when I was at Anime Expo, and at the end of the trip, he was inspired to bring it back for his next project. I also have an OC with the name Icarus, and when he learned the name, not too long after, he decided to make a project called Icarus. Small in hindsight, I have no issues with people sharing ideas or having similar ideas, but this is a common thing that is going on. Even at conventions, he will tell me to go around and look for ideas for him to use. Oh, that's interesting. And again, all of these aren't problematic by themselves, but when you add the fact he's using AI and is so liberal with the use of photo bashing, it makes you wonder how he sources his ideas. And in Ross's book, Nemaverse, he has a self-insert character of himself called Flip that's supposed to represent his love of cooking. But Ross is notoriously known for not cooking at all. And as somebody who stayed with him multiple times, I can vouch for this. A really nice kitchen, but all I see are salad kits, meal delivery, and energy drinks. So why is yourself inserting a chef with a cat when you don't cook and have a dog? He also calls Flip a dream cooker, and our mutual friend is working on a game where you're a dream chef. So this looks to be the self-insert character with the cat. Fen continues, speaking of Ross's dog, Melio, I am very uncomfortable with how Ross treats Melio. Or Milo, sorry, saying Melio like he's the freaking League of Legends champ. Milo doesn't really have any toys to play with. The last time I stayed there, Ross bought Milo a ball that he tore apart in an hour, and that's it. He doesn't give him any treats or snacks. And one day, Milo was bothering Ross, and Ross just yelled at Milo. But when I look around, it turns out his water bowl is empty, and he just wanted water, so I filled it myself. And the way Ross yells at Milo isn't just a "you're misbehaving" yell, but it was a deep, low register, angry yell. This was just how he acted with Milo when I was present, so I can only imagine when I'm not there. This also just adds to my belief that he doesn't see things as what they are and only props, because we only see Milo when he has to make content for Instagram and YouTube. Overall, his behaviors as a business feels more like a grift rather than creating for the sake of creating. His Kickstarter for Nima was a mess. He kept saying he was making an anime out of his characters, but you don't hear anything about it. He made a statue of Nima and accepted pre-orders, but there have been no real updates about it. I have asked him about the statue and if there are any updates, but he has ignored those remarks and still brings the statue to promote at conventions. And during his hiatus, he has only made a post to promote that he's selling at a convention or to launch a product. Then we never hear about it again. I also will say we've definitely seen a lot of grifts over the days of people making things like games on Kickstarter and never delivering. Maybe the production is just slow. I don't know how long ago this statue was made. Then continues, one last thing I want to mention about Ross to speak on his inflated sense of self is that he compares himself to Kim Jong G. He's working with a publisher for his next book and wants to price it higher than necessary because Kim Jong-gi books are also expensive. In my opinion, this is a comparison and statement that never should have happened. I actually don't know who Kim Jong-gi is. Oh, I recognize his art. Okay, I didn't know his name, but his art is extremely recognizable. Okay, yeah, wait, I recognize this guy. Oh, well, I mean, Kim's a goat. So these are the DMs. This happened July 11th, 2024. Ross says, yeah, that makes sense story-wise. Kim Jong-gi books are like $1 billion. I know I'm not him, but still, it's like a similar energy, but I am a little friendlier brand, so maybe it's okay. Fen says it's definitely not a similar energy. Two completely different vibes, and Kim Jong-gi is more well-known, while you're well-known only in the niche that you're in. I stopped comparing yourself to him, TBH. Also, a completely different publisher. He's also very much considered to be one of the masters of the generation at this point. And Ross Draw says, I'm gonna try at least 50. We'll see. I don't know, I feel weird devaluing my work, but it's a big publisher, so I feel they'll really fuck up on my behalf. But Fen continues, one of the last things I will mention is that a part of me thinks Ross may be racist or have racial biases. For context, I'm a black man, Haitian American. While we were having dinner one day, Ross decided to see us by race. I don't even want to finish reading that. Why? Saying the Koreans, the Vietnamese, and points to me and calls me the diversity hire. I just had to sit there and awkwardly laugh. I feel like everyone felt just as awkward, but nobody really said anything and we moved on. Guys, do I have to explain why seating people by race is fucking weird? I thought we left that back in like the 1900s, you know? Fen continues, then Ross has this character in the book, a girl with a dark skin tone, and she was one of my favorites in the book. But over time, he lightened her skin tone, had covered her up so much, and gave her more Eurocentric features overall. Below, I only have 2 images, unfortunately, since again, he's very intentional on what he sends. The first image is the original lineup, and the character on the right had her afro, a little darker, still covered, but overall still looked great. Below that, he tried to make sure fro looked more flowy and straight, removing those Afrocentric features. It made her skin more yellow. I don't have the image of the current iteration, but she's even more covered up, while all the other characters are essentially naked and in bodysuits. He also has a bad reputation on depicting people with darker skin tones over the years, and it was allegedly to me that used the N-word, mainly when he was singing songs, but that doesn't make it any more okay. There were other things much worse alleged to me, but it'd be very obvious where he heard some of these from. And given the fact that he also fought me on pavement but would pay other employees without a hassle only makes me believe this further. Oh, so I'm guessing this is the character, right? The one with the afro, and then, oh, he like straightened the hair out, she's lighter. You could maybe argue that it's different lighting, whatever. I've been told by many people to just let this go and hope that the consequences of his actions catch up to him, but this is how the cycle keeps perpetuating itself. Again, I can't speak for other people that has worked for Ross, and nor do I want people to pester anybody else surrounding this topic. I've spoken to Ross about my feelings on all of these issues just to be told, thank you for telling me and honoring your truth, and that he's big enough to process and learn from this. But in order to protect himself and his energy, he needs to distance himself from me. Which left a bad taste in my mouth because I know it's hard to hear criticism, but to paint it as protecting himself from this energy sounds like a way to remove the only other person who is trying to hold him accountable for his actions. He doesn't want to be held accountable, which means the next person to take my place in his life will only deal with the same issues as I have. There are probably other things that I'm missing for now, but this is all I can remember at this moment. Is not good. Maybe I'm wrong, right? Most of the time, people don't accuse other people of racism lightly. So here's what some commenters had to say. Mikey Morrow comments, ew, but honestly not surprised considering he was one of the first YouTubers I saw to make a video about it and was hyped for using it in his workflow. And Beazle says, to be fair, the tech was more of a novelty back then. But still, when things got more advanced, he just dove deep instead of realizing how awful of a thing it is. I think this video potentially could be what is referenced, pro artist versus AI art. Maybe we can be friends. And this video from Ross Draws has 153k views 2 years ago. Then Beazle writes, I can personally say that I've been shown a lot of this work from Ross himself about a year ago, and I could instantly tell it was made heavily with AI. Personally, if somebody references AI, I tend to not care. But Ross is somebody whose entire brand is based on being transparent and learning how to create art from your imagination. I can confirm and have seen with my own eyes that a lot of his new works that are public, as well as things not published yet, are heavily using Gen AI, and he is intentionally misleading his community and business partners into thinking it isn't. And another commenter, K10, writes, this 100%. It's fraud if you're presenting AI as original art. In my opinion, Ross was always more of a content creator than an artist, but it's a shame nonetheless if he went down this path. I'll wait for more evidence to come out before I really pass hard judgment though. Another commenter, Fun Time Laughing, writes, why does he even need to do this? He can actually draw, so why is he now using AI? So that he can make money? Most people don't want to buy products that were made by somebody who couldn't even do it themselves, specifically if the person is able to make quality content. Beazle responds, he told me himself he doesn't even like drawing. He quit art school to try to become an actor and he sucked at that, so went back to art. His rebrand is him supposedly quitting art and going into music. For him, it's just business and he likes the attention. And Beazle continues, what I mean by quote, he doesn't like drawing, end quote, is he said he's over it. It takes him too long to make things, hence why he's now using AI and lying about it, and he enjoys other things more, like making music. Funtime Laughing says, he really needs to focus on himself and not do this kind of stuff, like focus on ways to get music and shit to work. Like he needs to figure out how to make himself happy with his work, because it's just sad and scummy to use AI in this way. And Beazle responds, I won't share specifics on personal accounts, but I can tell you I tried very patiently to point out several issues with his behavior in person. It resulted in him lashing back at me and guilting me. He needs real professional therapy before he can work on himself, not this rich hippie bullshit he calls a mental health retreat. That just inflated his ego further. So Victoria writes, I looked at all his socials. Are you sure he posted this and not an AI bro? And Beazle said he showed this to me himself in person. It's his work 100%. And another user, Waffle Time Cat, writes, unsurprising given his NFT phase, but still disappointing. The Art Gun writes, a true shame to see this come out. Some missteps at the beginning of a career make sense, but continuous unequal treatment of business partners and friends. If everything in the doc is true, it's quite bad and inexcusable. And Beazle says, I can confirm without a doubt all this is true, and there's so much worse not being said due to Fen and others, including myself, having a bit more respect for people's privacy. And then Beazle quote retweeted a tweet made by Fen, writing another ex-employee and artist speaking up about Ross Draws. So this is a post Fen or Fennec Soul made on their page, writing a former employee has also shared her thoughts, sharing on here with permission. The employee goes by the handle Mindoodly, and they write, first and foremost, I'd like to state that I personally don't think that Ross is an evil individual with malicious intent. He can be a kind person who cares deeply about those around him. I do not pray for his downfall, nor am I sharing my story to contribute to that. Rather, I hope that my experiences serve as a warning to aspiring young artists who end up working for larger artists in the industry. With that being said, his business practices are unethical. Although Ross works extremely hard, he is also very privileged to the point where he doesn't understand the importance of fairly compensating his team. In his Google Doc, Fen talks about how he didn't get paid for working his first con with him, and he includes a screenshot where Ross assumed that he was volunteering. If anybody has worked a convention booth, they know how exhausting and labor-intensive that position is. It's basically sales with extra long hours. You're constantly on your feet, generating sales, and barely have any time to eat. Maybe it's just me, but not paying for somebody's labor when they're literally making you money seems like an advantageous move. Not to mention the power balance at play because younger fans are less willing to put up boundaries. When I first began working for Ross, I started at minimum wage. This was partly on me because I didn't negotiate pay even though I had previous administrative experience. I was young, excited for the opportunity, and I figured I could ask for a fair raise after proving myself. So I kept my head down and did the absolute best I could. It was basically akin to a startup environment, and his studio grew quickly with the release of Nima and Patreon campaigns. As his only employee at the time, I quickly learned to wear many hats: personal assistant, executive assistant, con booth worker, e-commerce manager, order fulfillment, customer service, Patreon co-host, video editor, graphic designer, the list goes on. It was fun and insightful, but my stress grew as my workload increased. When the time came, I did my research on how much executive assistants were getting paid. Keep in mind, I was living in Los Angeles. It was dumb of me at the time, but I actually had to dig into my savings to supplement this job. I even took on a brief side gig. Although it's a huge jump from my starting wage, I think I asked for something along the lines of $22 an hour because of all the work I was doing. He declined and raised me to $15. This is insane. I pay my editor double this, like more than double, and he doesn't live in LA. I continued to do all of that and work for just $15 an hour. By the end of my time here, I was only raised to $17, which was when he bought his house and saw a drastic increase in business from his art bootcamp, which was my idea. I saw all his income streams and knew that I could be paid more, not out of entitlement, but just by need to afford basic necessities like rent, groceries, etc. I had to vouch for the next assistant to be started at my current pay because he wanted to go lower. And in this economy, in SoCal, that's already pretty low for the kind of skills this niche job requires. On my last day, I actually showed him my budget to try and explain for the last time the importance of paying his employees fairly. He took a quick look at the paper and said, quote, wow, LA is really expensive. Are you going to stay here, end quote, which I don't think was out of unkindness, but from being out of touch. This is kind of crazy though. Like the out of touch is insane. Typically for employers, a fair amount of times, employers would pay more based on where you live. As in like, oh, if you do live in LA and we are based in LA, then we're going to pay you more because LA's cost of living is higher and we want you to come in person. But if you live I don't know, in Kansas and you are working remote, well, you're going to be paid less because your cost of living is lower, but also because your job requirements are lower due to you being remote. I think it's weird that this employee lives in LA and Ross doesn't recognize that, hey, them being in LA is beneficial to you because they can help you in person for events, con attendance, whatever, right? A lot of cons are held in LA or near LA. Like Anime Expo is in LA, San Diego Comic Con's only 2 hours away, 3 hours if you have traffic. Like, it's not a sin to be out of touch. It just makes you a little bit insensitive to those around you. So Min continues, was I salty? Honestly, yes. I let myself get taken advantage of and devoted myself entirely to that job. I worked so hard and truly believed in the brand, especially seeing how many fans' hearts he touched. It was cool to be a part of something larger than myself. To be transparent, he did treat me to nice bougie dinners and gave me bonuses after cons and Christmas, but that didn't remove the struggle of living paycheck to paycheck. The dinners didn't pay my bills, and the bonuses would quickly disappear to buy groceries. I had a lot of moments like the scene in Parasite where the chauffeur dad is listening in on the mom's phone convo. I felt our class differences, and it was weird because I was working for him. This is just one example I'll share because I don't want the situation to snowball into a shit show, and it's scary for me to do so because I don't want it to seem like an attack on his character or that I'm trying to use this for my own gain. It's just disappointing that he hasn't learned after all these years and is continuing to take advantage of young fans. The use of AI is upsetting as well. To be honest, I know not many people will see this, and the reality of people getting canceled is that the whole situation blows over after 3 business days because everybody forgets. I just want this to serve as a warning for aspiring young artists and fans to be wary when entering the industry. Know your worth and stand up for yourself. I had a lot of good and bad moments on the job. Overall, I'm grateful for the experience because it eventually taught me to value myself and my contributions, that I deserve more. After 1.5-ish years, I left to pursue my own path of becoming an artist. I remember on the job, he constantly made promises of helping me enter the industry. When I was working my portfolio and finished it, he asked to see it. Both times, it never amounted to any feedback or connections. I wasn't expecting anything in return because I figured he was busy, but it felt a little hurtful after him seeming like he was genuinely interested in helping me achieve my own dreams after I helped him with his. But that's not always the case, and it's okay because I ended up making it with the help of other amazing friends in my life, which I'm very fortunate and grateful for. So at the end of the day, we all need to support one another as artists. We know how difficult it is to make it in a world where many don't value the work that we do. We're already butting heads with studios and companies to be compensated fairly, so if we're hiring help from within our own community, we should fairly compensate them for their time and efforts. I think this is especially important if you're hiring young artists, as you're showing them that they are worth a living. Hell, even thriving if you can afford it. Wage. It's disgustingly easy to get stuck in a desperate cycle where you only take jobs that don't pay well because being poor is expensive. I think that is also very well said. Artists should be paid fairly. Artists are notoriously underpaid. And it's just sad to see that here we have a scenario of an artist who is hiring for help and is continuing to underpay artists who are helping him. And Beazle commented under the quote retweet writing, dude living in a mansion with a literal moat, meanwhile paying his employees below living wages. And by the way, I could be wrong, right? Because in Phoenix's document, they were referencing a mutual with a character with a lot of eye and motifs and glitches. Pretty sure Beazle is the person that is being referenced here, you know, with all of the eye motifs and the mouths. Another example here, another example of little companions, you know, with the glitch effect. Not fully sure, would not be surprised. And Beazle adds, first move from a narcissist, when they are called out on bad behavior, 1, they make it about how they feel. They change the discussion from the bad thing they did to how bad they feel that somebody would say blah blah blah. They wouldn't continue the conversation until you are okay with moving forward with the main subject of the conversation, reframe to focus on what they want you to focus on, essentially changing the subject and narrative of the discussion. This is a very basic manipulation tactic. Step 2, damage control. Try to hide until all the evidence is gone. Hope people forget. So this will be interesting. But as of now, Ross doesn't seem to have made any comments about it, any statements. His Twitter is dead. YouTube, he last posted a month ago. On his Instagram, no post about it either. So who knows? Likely he's probably just gonna lay low and hope that this whole thing blows over. I just feel really bad for everybody that is involved. I'll have all the people linked down below, Beazle and Phoenix, because it's so not fair that they had to go through all of this at the hands of this individual that is using other people and allegedly AI artwork as well. So what are your thoughts on this whole thing? This really wraps it up to conclude. Don't meet your idols, guys, because you never know. And with that, I hope you like this video. If you do, I appreciate it if you like and subscribed. I also have an Etsy shop where I have digital goods and assets, and I also have a coffee with free stuff there as well. And I also stream on Twitch 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, Saturdays at 6 p.m. PST. So I hope to catch you guys there or in another one of my videos. Peace.